95 years, and we can show you the top 500 companies. These are the largest companies that trade, and whether you trade in the stock market or not, as I've told you, this will affect you because these type of losses come with consequences and eventually job cuts and, of course, the price and inflation issues. This is down another 6% today. Another market index you heard of, the Dow, shed over 5%. The NASDAQ, another big bucket of stocks, losing just about 6%. This is what they call an official bear market, where you are down a fifth from the peak. Trillions gone. The Fed now warning Trump's tariffs will juice inflation. Remember, that was the big issue, the high prices that helped him over the understandable concern with inflation and the way people blamed then President Biden. Well, Donald Trump's serving up more inflation. That's
With MAGA, the cruelty isn't a side effect, it's the entire point. The movement thrives on causing pain to those it sees as enemies. And let's be honest, that list keeps growing. It's not just political opponents anymore. It's anyone who isn't a billionaire, anyone who isn't bending the knee to Donald Trump. If you don't fall in line, they don't care if you eat, if you have a place to sleep, or even if you survive. They're coming after the social safety nets that keep people afloat. Food assistance, housing programs, healthcare, gone. They're attacking the rule of law so no one can challenge Trump without consequences. And worst of all, they're targeting the core freedoms of this country, including due process. Want proof? Just look at Trump's illegal and deeply immoral mass deportation plan. It's already facing a lawsuit and the fallout is starting fast. Enter Carolyn Levitt, who is absolutely melting down over this lawsuit. Her reaction, one of the most disturbing and unhinged we've seen in a long time. But before we dive into that train wreck, I want to take a step back and give you the full picture, some context, and a powerful dose of truth and emotion from Congressman Jamie Raskin. Let's roll the clip.
Judge Jeb Boasberg, the chief judge of the District Court of the District of Columbia, who enjoined the mass roundup and deportation of immigrants to an infamous El Salvadoran prison in peacetime without any due process at all, allegedly under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a statute explicitly limited to wartime and military invasion. Some of our colleagues have been railing against Judge Boasberg for ordering the planes to be turned around. They say those planes were filled with terrorists, I think my good friend from Texas said. Well, here's one person of many who wasn't a terrorist on that flight or a gangbanger. His name's Kilmer Garcia. He's a Marylander married to a U.S. citizen who has a 5-year-old son with autism. And he went to pick up his son, but he was picked up first by ICE. And then he was shackled and put on that airplane and shipped off to the torturers of El Salvador without ever having the benefit of those two most beautiful words in the English language, due process. He never saw a judge. Nobody ever told him what he was being charged for. Nobody ever told him that there were any charges against him. And he was sent to a mega prison run by the self-proclaimed dictator of El Salvador. And yesterday, you know what happened, Mr. Chairman? The Trump administration admitted that it had made a mistake. He was not actually a gangbanger. He was not a criminal. It was all a mistake. If there'd been due process, maybe that would have been determined, but there wasn't. But they put him on that plane and he's El Salvador. Well, all's well that ends well, right? No. The administration says there's nothing they can do about it now because he's no longer in U.S. custody. This guy who lives in my state, married to a U.S. citizen with citizen children, he's stuck with the dictator of El Salvador. Well, Judge Boasberg, some of our colleagues want to impeach him. Look, some of our colleagues, they've got "for wanted" signs in the Cannon House office building with the names and faces of judges on them. They want to impeach them now. They want to impeach Judge Boasberg. Some of my colleagues should be alerted to this fact. Judge Boasberg was first named to the bench by President Bush.
They dragged a man, a father, out of his home and deported him straight into one of the most terrifying prisons in the world. And the worst part? They don't care. Not about the mistake, not about the suffering, not even after admitting they got it wrong. They're just gonna keep charging forward because in their minds, there's no accountability, no consequences, just power and cruelty. But here's the truth, they are accountable. This isn't a dictatorship, at least not yet. The courts still exist and they're still capable of checking Donald Trump's abuses of power. That's exactly what happened here. This isn't just about one man's deportation. It's about a system of unchecked authority that's finally getting challenged. So before we even touch on Carolyn Leavitt's unhinged reaction, her meltdown in response to this lawsuit, we need to set the stage. You need to see the context. You need to understand the cruelty behind this policy and why this lawsuit might be the first real crack in the wall. ADD article here. Judge orders return of Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. A federal judge ruled Friday that a Maryland father who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador must be returned to the U.S. by Monday, April 7th. Kilmer Abrego Garcia was deported to a Supermax prison on March 15th, despite a protection order granted in 2019 that should have kept him from being sent to El Salvador. He filed a lawsuit against several federal officials demanding to be returned to the U.S. Thank you to everyone that has helped us and supported us in fighting this. Abrego, Garcia's wife, Jennifer, told a crowd outside the courthouse following the ruling. A statement from the advocacy organization CASA said, "We will continue to fight this. The first thing I'm going to do when I see him is give him a big hug." A court has officially ruled Donald Trump's administration deported a man illegally and immorally, and now he must be returned. That's the law stepping in, saying enough is enough. A rare moment of accountability in an era defined by chaos and cruelty. But now ask yourself, what do you think the Trump camp's reaction was? What do you think Carolyn Leavitt, one of Trump's most vocal defenders, had to say? Yeah. It's about as bad as you'd imagine. Rather than acknowledging the harm done or even pretending to care about the rule of law, the reaction has been one of outrage. Not at the injustice, not at the suffering, but at the fact that a court dared to challenge Trump's authority, that a system had the audacity to say, this was wrong, and Carolyn Leavitt, she absolutely lost it. Meltdown, full denial mode, one of the ugliest, most tone-deaf reactions we've seen in a while. No empathy, no accountability, just rage. We'll break it down in a second, but first, here's the article that lays out exactly what the court found and why this ruling matters so much. Trump administration mocks judge's order to bring back Maryland father from Salvador in prison, even after admitting he was deported in error. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt mocked a judicial ruling on Friday that ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of a man it had deported. U.S. district. A U.S. district judge ordered the administration to obtain the release of Kilmer Abrego Garcia from the notorious CEO prison in El Salvador and bring him back to the U.S. Abrego Garcia is a Salvadoran national who was arrested in Baltimore on March 12th after leaving his job as a sheet metal worker to pick up his 5-year-old son. The government has alleged that Abrego Garcia belongs to the MS-13 gang, but in a court filing on Monday, lawyers for U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement at Abrego was deported due to an administrative error. Abrego Garcia was one of more than 216 foreign nationals arrested in the U.S. and deported to El Salvador for imprisonment. Most of those deported were Venezuelans who have no apparent connection to the Central American country. None of the people apprehended appear to have been given due process. The record reflects that Ago Garcia was apprehended in Maryland without legal basis and without further process or legal justification was removed to El Salvador lawyer. His lawyer wrote in her order after describing the deportation as an illegal act. In response, Leavitt slammed the ruling and denied the judge had any legal basis for issuing it. We are unaware of the judge having jurisdiction or authority over the country of El Salvador. Leavitt said in a statement, White House advisor Stephen Miller mocked the judge on X, stating that she thinks she's the president of El Salvador. The White House's response suggests that the administration is of the view that once a deport is out of the U.S., the judiciary lacks the authority to order the return, including those the administration itself said were mistakenly deported. It is unclear if the administration believes the U.S. citizens it deports would also not be subject to U.S. judicial oversight. And Donald Trump and Carolyn Levitt are basically saying, oopsies, we screwed up, but we don't care. And just like that, they move on. No accountability, no remorse, no recognition of the trauma they've inflicted on real people. Levitt, in a moment that tells you everything you need to know, actually mocked the judge, joking that the court thinks it's running El Salvador. That's the level we're dealing with here. A federal judge ruled in favor of a man, a lawful permanent resident of the United States, someone with rights, someone who is legally entitled to due process. And Levitt thinks it's a punchline. She's laughing at the idea that this man should be treated as a human being. It's disgusting. Carolyn Levitt is disgusting. And let's be clear, with MAGA, the cruelty is always the point. They want to dehumanize. They want to mock. They want to strip rights away and laugh while doing it. And what makes this even more vile? This entire show, the deportations, the cruelty, the mockery, isn't even about immigration. It's about covering their failure. Their big flashy mass deportation plan. It flopped. The numbers weren't what they hoped. So instead of policy, they went for pain. They chose human rights violations as a distraction. Because distraction is also the point. Leavitt doesn't want you asking questions about Trump's collapsing administration. She wants you angry, confused, distracted. Just look at her tweet. It says everything. Great news. The economy is starting to roar with the strong 228,000 jobs added in the month of March, well ahead of the market's expectation. There was also a sharp increase in transportation construction and warehousing employment. The president's push to onshore jobs here in the United States is working. The golden age of America is on its way. Ah yes, the golden age of America, as Carolyn Leavitt so confidently declares. Meanwhile, the Dow is tumbling and recession red flags are lighting up like a Christmas tree. This is peak gaslighting. She's out here throwing a parade for a so-called economic boom while the actual numbers are flashing warning signs. Let's be real. If President Biden posted the same weak job numbers or faced these economic tremors, Fox News would be in full meltdown mode. Wall-to-wall coverage, emergency graphics, Hannity probably yelling into a camera, but because it's Trump, crickets, or worse, praise. So instead of pretending we're living in some fantasy version of 1950s America 2.0, let's get grounded in reality. Let's check the real state of play, economically and politically, and for that, there's no better breakdown than from Ari Melber.
95 years, and we can show you the top 500 companies. These are the largest companies that trade, and whether you trade in the stock market or not, as I've told you, this will affect you because these type of losses come with consequences and eventually job cuts. And of course, the price and inflation issues. This is down another 6% today. Another market index you heard of, the Dow, shed over 5%. The NASDAQ, another big bucket of stocks, losing just about 6%. This is what they call an official bear market, where you are down a fifth from the peak. Trillions gone. The Fed now warning Trump's tariffs will juice inflation. Remember, that was the big issue, the high prices that helped him over the understandable concern with inflation and the way people blamed then President Biden. Well, Donald Trump's serving up more inflation. That's according to the Fed, which is the independent arm of monetary policy for the federal government, and of course, the risk of recession or slower growth. One of the top banks, JP Morgan, says we have tipped over to a recession now being more likely than not, 60%. That is, based on all the modules they have, it is more likely than not that Trump's choice to do these tariffs will give us a recession that otherwise was less likely. Indeed, before Trump came into office, though, same banks were putting the recession fears much lower, like 20%. The Financial Times, which is sort of the British version of the Wall Street Journal as a Bible for the market, says this is an astonishing act of self-harm by Donald Trump. Then their counterpart that I mentioned in the U.S., Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, quote, someone should sue to block his abuse of power. The Journal, now suddenly concerned about Trump lawlessness, something they have often minimized on other topics. China is hitting back, and boy, do they have the resources and the runway to do it. They're matching the whopping 30% tariff. Economics can be complicated, but this part is simple. I will tell you, America, if I can speak directly with you, you will be paying that tariff. That's exactly how it works, which is exactly why so many people, apart from our divided political times and partisan lenses, so many people, from nonpartisan experts to liberals who warned against this, to Republicans who privately warned against this, although they didn't use any power to try to stop Trump, to Wall Street experts, to, of course, economists explain, yeah, a third a third, 34% spike, and you're going to pay it because that's what Donald Trump decided for you. Welcome to Donald Trump's America and his economics.
You're tanking the economy. You're not bringing jobs back. You're putting working people at risk of losing everything. So no, Carolyn Levitt, this isn't some golden age of America fairy tale. It's a brutal reality check. And honestly, Carolyn Levitt isn't just wrong. She's a horrible, despicable person. That's my take. And that's where I'm leaving it, because if I keep going, I might say something that'll get this video flagged. Let's be crystal clear. With MAGA, the cruelty is the point. Every policy, every press conference, every tweet, it's about inflicting pain on the people they've decided aren't worthy of dignity or rights. It's grotesque, it's dangerous, and it has to be called out. And that's exactly what we're going to keep doing every single day on this channel. So if you're with us, if you believe in truth over propaganda, and if you're just as fed up as we are, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Until next time, stay strong, stay loud, and I'll see you then.